What is going on? I want to welcome you from Half Court for Monday, August 15th. I'm your host, Sean Murphy, alongside my duo, my guy, Jeff Iafrady. Jeff, we are halfway through the dead month of the NBA. How are you holding up, my brother?
I'm doing good, and what's keeping me still so invested is the rumors. Like, no matter if it's Kevin
Mm,
Durant giving his owner an ultimatum, or simply other rumors involving the Pistons, which one we'll be discussing today. So I can't wait.
yeah, for sure. There has been some reports and some buzz around one Draymond Green of the Golden State Warriors, specifically reports suggesting that he might want to come back to the Detroit Pistons and play in his hometown. Jeff, let's talk about the feasibility of this, and let's talk about what it looks like. I'm trying to find the original report in itself so we can actually dig deeper into it. But while I pull that up, do you want to talk a little bit about what your thoughts initially when you hear Draymond Green is a Detroit Piston?
What gets me excited, obviously, but I think the statement, him coming out and saying that he'd like to play in Detroit, is simply just leverage in terms of contract negotiations with the Golden State Warriors. I mean, obviously, Draymond grew up a Pistons fan. He's from Saginaw, Michigan, went to Saginaw High School. And if we're talking strictly basketball, it would be a great fit. I mean, the guy has one of the highest basketball IQs in the NBA. He's the perfect guy for building a winning culture. He's battle tested, obviously, with the Warriors. He's their vocal leader. And you see the value he has just on the bench, on the court, and behind the scenes. But that's not the issue we're really talking. It's also the contract is really the only issue I have, because he's making around $26 million the next 2 seasons. He wants another max, and rightfully so. I mean, he feels his own value. He'd be incredibly valuable on the Pistons, making sure guys are in the right spots defensively, offensively, and considering how young this team is, that's beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
But the benefit for Draymond also, because he wants more money, and even more than he's already making, and the Golden State Warriors are in a tough spot because if they do give him a new contract, they're deep in the luxury tax. His game doesn't really age with. I mean, age with, it's not based on athleticism. Like, the older he gets, he can still be Draymond. The only problem I have, though, is on the Pistons. We expect them to make a move like this in the future, where you go out and it's a win now move. You trade for a guy or sign a guy that can take your team to the next level. And considering Draymond is going to be a free agent in 2 seasons with the Detroit Pistons, they're going to be better. They're going to be in a different position than they are this season. But the downside is, if you pay a guy like that, the max, obviously someone who wants to be in Detroit, I'm excited. But you're paying him what, 30, $35 million for a guy who sometimes is, or really in the finals, you saw it, a liability offensively. And as long as he doesn't lose anything defensively, there's still value. But if he gets older and he starts losing things defensively, now you have a guy who's a liability really on both sides of the ball. Now he can still be a leader and he brings those things that don't show up in the stat sheet. But if we're talking, giving him that much money, you have to acknowledge too, these guys, Cade, Sadiq, Jaden, other guys as well as Isaiah Stewart, you're going to have to extend them in the future. So it's really weighing the options. If we're talking strictly basketball, I like the fit. But with the contract and what you're going to have to pay him, that's where what kind of backs me off a little bit with Draymond.
Right. So this report did come from Jack Simone of Heavy.com. And in the article, he cites how certain sources say that Draymond Green has always wanted to play for the Pistons at some point in his career, citing that reportedly Draymond Green's role model is Ben Wallace. He grew up from Saginaw, Michigan. That was his hometown team. So you hear a lot of those things, and it makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of players talk about the idea of wanting to play for their hometown team at some point, but it comes down to the feasibility of it. How much is that actually likely to happen? And when I'm looking at like where we could add value on this roster and where we could go, like it's certainly you want like a wing, you want someone that can play defense, that can guard multiple positions, someone that can affect that side of the ball. And Draymond can certainly do that
Mhm.
at an elite level. He has great defensive instincts. So like you'll know that he'll always be a good defensive player. But the question is, what is he going to bring to you on that offensive side of the ball? Like, could it not be more beneficial for the Pistons to say go get someone more like a PJ Tucker, say someone like a like a Jay Crowder, someone that wouldn't quite be as expensive, someone that could fill maybe a lesser role on the team in that sense. Because like if Draymond's going to come in, like you said, you're going to have to pay him max dollars. You're going to be putting a prominent role in place, which not that Draymond Green can't handle. We've seen him
Mhm.
handle that and be great in the Warrior system and be this, arguably the secret behind the Warriors' success for so long. But Draymond Green this year is going to be 32. And when you're looking at the longevity of certain players, Draymond's one of those guys where you could see as his 30s goes on, you could see that deny or that not the denial, but like that downward slope start to be a little sharp. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like you could see very abruptly Draymond's effect on the game go down. So
Yeah, and I think, like I said, a lot of his game isn't based on athleticism, but to your point and what you're talking about, and I agree, it's like he has good defensive instincts, but what about his lateral quickness as he gets older? It's that type of stuff. Like
right,
he can still be a great defender mentally, but physically, if he loses anything, he's already a liability offensively. Like in me and Brandon Kool-Aid, aka Kool-Aid, on the Woodward Pistons podcast, we've talked about like where do you replace Jeremy Grant defensively? Because that's my biggest concern.
right,
Draymond's that guy. He would fill that
yeah.
void. But do you need Draymond by that point? Because then you'd have two guys like Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham, who in 2 years are going to be even better. You're going to want the ball in their hands. But if you get Draymond, how does that work? And I think it would benefit them, obviously. But it's just the question is, are you willing to pay a guy $35 million to be a culture changer? Do things that don't show up on the stat sheet. I'm looking at a guy who can, hold his own and get buckets. That's kind of my ideal. When you go get a
Yeah.
veteran, when Troy Weaver makes that decision, it's an all-star. It's a guy who can, affect the game in multitude of ways. And Draymond can do that, but offensively, there's some questions
And even
still.
then, from a leadership standpoint, do you want Draymond coming in because he would very much try to be that team leader, be that number one voice in the locker room? Would that clash with Cade? How would that work? How would that go together? I mean, I think Cade is the type of guy that can play with absolutely anybody. And I think
Mhm.
Draymond is a champion. We've seen him be able to play with stars in the past, but at the same time, you got to accept everything that comes with Draymond Green, which is everything that's good, everything that's not so good. And,
Right.
Draymond, I think obviously he embodies everything what it means to be a Detroit Piston. But it's again, if you're talking about Draymond saying, I want a max contract in your mid 30s, where we were talking about whether or not we should give DeAndre Ayton a max contract. Now,
Mhm.
Draymond Green in his mid 30s, a guy who's been a couple time multiple time all-star, a couple time defensive player of the year, great player. But again, does he fit our timeline? Because I think with the Pistons, you have to take the long haul here. And I think
Mhm.
if you go get Draymond at some point, you're saying we got to win now because we have to capitalize the final good years of Draymond Green. And we have to make the most of the opportunity of having a guy who's a champion in our locker room. That would be the mindset, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think one thing I'm curious to see as well, and this isn't a shot at Draymond, but seeing Draymond outside of Golden State, outside of that system, he would be walking into a Detroit Pistons team who's now had 2 years to gel together. And then you're just going to drop Draymond and be like, be Draymond. And you're hoping he has that same impact like he's had on the Golden State Warriors. But again, you're projecting. So in 2 years, I'm not too concerned about these rumors. I think Troy, when it's all said and done, will be the man making the decision, and I trust him. So everything's all
Right.
good in my head. But if you're telling me, would you like Draymond Green at 30, $35 million, whatever it is, for 4 years? Maybe for the first year, but then as he gets older, if you see any type of decline, we're back in a similar situation where now you have a max contract player that's unmovable. So it's a risk, but it's probably one that I wouldn't be willing to take though if I'm
Yeah.
Troy
Well,
Weaver.
well, and here's the thing. All the reports that we're hearing are saying that Draymond Green would be interested in going home to Detroit.
Hmm.
We're not hearing reports that are saying that the Pistons are interested in Draymond Green. They could be. And if he was available, I'm sure they'd be willing to have a conversation,
Right.
but it would have to be on Troy Weaver's price. It would have to be something that would have to be agreed upon on both sides. And in all likelihood, listen, the likelihood of Draymond Green leaving the Golden State Warriors, in my opinion, are low, no matter what. It's just hard for me to see someone that's so instrumental to their organization, to their success, to the dynasty. Even with what they have going on right now, they're still going to want to go out and try to win some games and really try to maximize the last years of Steph Curry's prime. I don't see a reason why Draymond Green would leave the Warriors, but even if he did, I just don't think Detroit would be the place, just for the sense that everything that would have to happen in order for that to make sense, because you have to remember Sadiq Bey's contract's coming up.
Mhm.
Isaiah Stewart's contract is coming up. You're going to have to make a decision on what you're going to do with Killian Hayes' contract. And then the year after that, Cade Cunningham's extension's there. So with that, that's not even getting into the other potential veterans and free agency and markets that you can do. Detroit does have over $60 million in cap space, though, next year. So they are going to have room to play, but could they use that to perhaps bolster their team and make them deeper? In my opinion, Draymond's just one of those pieces where his career was perfect because it was in the system and it was in the team that he was in. He was
Mhm.
perfect for them. And not that he isn't great, not that he isn't a great winner, but again, maybe not right for Detroit.
Yeah, no, and I think another point to think about as well for Pistons fans, and I'm willing to ask this question. You can comment down below your answer. Would you be willing to trade for Draymond before his contract's up? I wouldn't. I think the only play would be as a free agent, but it depends. Like I'm curious. I think Draymond with these young guys in 2 years now, the contract is what shies me away.
Yeah.
The impact doesn't. I think it'd
Yeah.
be great for the guys. He'd keep everybody accountable. But it's a that's why it's such a great topic to talk about because it's like we had hesitancy paying Jeremy Grant $20 million, and now we're
Mhm.
talking Draymond at 30, 35. Like that's a tough one.
Yeah, for sure. Now, what I will say from a playmaking standpoint, Cade Cunningham and Draymond Green on a
Oh,
court,
that'd be nasty. Nah.
and in addition, to have Jalen Duren to be able to have the mentor of Draymond Green, that would be pretty awesome.
Hmm. And
That would be pretty awesome.
this is why I feel like you kind of hinted at it already. I feel like this is just a leverage play with the Golden State Warriors. I don't really. I think he'd like to play in Detroit, but again, it's like his number one option is Golden State. I think we
Well,
mutually agree there.
yeah, and like in the past, there's been murmurings of Draymond wanting to play in Detroit, and ultimately it turned out to be in leverage to get a bigger deal from Golden State. Like that's something that's happened before. So I think a lot of Pistons fans are just looking that in the past. But I mean, at the same time, I would say that it's not entirely, impossible or implausible to say that Draymond would be interested in Detroit, where I could see where if that is a scenario where he could come home, I could see him considering it, but it's not going to be for a pay cut. And again, that's going to be the conversation. How are you going to use your salary and when are you going to use it on the right players? Because that's going to be ultimately what's going to decide Troy Weaver's tenure in Detroit.
And another thing too, you have to think about is for Draymond in 2 years, we don't know where the Pistons are going to be. We think they'll be better, but if Draymond's a free agent and he has Golden State, who are still is chasing championship aspirations, still have championship aspirations, and you see Detroit, he'd want to be paid more to go to Detroit because he knows I have to get these guys off the ground. So unless it's already an attractive situation, like that's why you said before, there's so many things that have to go right for this to happen. The Pistons are moving up the ladder; they look like a serious contender in the East. He feels like, hey, I'm the last piece of this puzzle. Golden State doesn't offer him a con. Like there's so many. It's so far away. Even 2 years, he can get extended this offseason or next. So we'll wait and see. But it's an interesting question to pose. And I see a lot of Pistons fans would be down for it, a lot that wouldn't. So it's pretty split.
Yeah, but hey, at the very least, like we said, now it's time to start having the conversation of what veterans should we be looking at, and Draymond is just the first name that we're talking about. There's plenty of
It's a good
guys that
thing.
we're going to be hearing reports and interests for the Pistons because, you know what I mean, in the middle of the season last year was when we started hearing rumblings of who the Pistons were interested in this free agency period. So with that, we're going to be hearing about that, and there's going to be a lot of updates and conversations to be had, and there's no better place to be than from half court because myself and Jeff are going to be breaking it down there for every single piece of breaking news, updates, rumors, and we're going to be talking about it all, baby, because that's what we love to do. And with that, you better be following my guy Jeff on Twitter at Jeff IFReady and myself at
Yes, sir.
Sean Half Court. But also be sure that you're heading over to Woodward Pistons and checking out all the other content we're doing over there as well. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, everybody around the world, Be sure you're hitting that subscribe button. We thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you guys next time from Half Court.